So if we have a look at just a recap of the Aries ingress, right, of this year, 2025. I mean, astrologers have been talking about 2025 being, such a huge year because, Saturn ingresses into Aries, Neptune, Uranus into Gemini, and the back and forward of, Saturn and Neptune. There's a lot going on. And again, a lot of focus on the 0 point of the zodiac. So if we look back at the Aries ingress, we can see that we had Mercury and Venus retrograde at the time. And I remember talking about this at the Aries ingress. I'll put some links to anyone that wants to follow up on things that we've talked about before, let's say, is that it's very rare to find Venus and Mercury together at an Aries ingress, okay? And as Venus's star point happened just like within 24 hours after this Aries ingress at 2 degrees of Aries, the Venus star point is edging closer every 4 years to that 0 point. So, it's again a hotspot with the Venus star there over the next 8 years as well, before she moves into Pisces in the early 2030s. Oh, a bit later. Yeah, somewhere around there. If it was 4 years, 25, 29, yeah, 30, 33, 30, 2033. Sorry. Then we can see that Pluto was the midpoint of the sun and the moon. And if we look at the last 3 months and what we've been experiencing and being on the edge of like a World War III scenario, the Pluto moon sun midpoint is very evident there. The moon out of bounds reminds us that we are in the year of the peak of what we call the lunar standstill, where every 2 weeks the moon is going out of bounds. The last full moon in Sagittarius, the moon was fully out of bounds. And of course, it has to happen at the solstice points for the moon to be extended, like fully out of bounds in this lunar standstill. That only happens every 18 years. So again, a culmination of all these extreme energies. And so just wanted to sort of recap that. We had Mars post retrograde in Cancer that really sort of shuffled a lot of things around, uncomfortably so, as it's not his sign, ruling over all these Aries planets. Jupiter also not comfortable in Gemini, ruling over all the Pisces planets. And, they're kind of, this Aries ingress is still overseeing the whole year until we sort of get into early 2026, where the next Aries ingress starts overlapping. And then looking back at the ACG map for the Aries ingress 2025, look at this, now having, seen what's going on in Tehran, we've got Mars moving right through the middle of Tehran. We've got all that Aries retrograde energy and Pisces all culminating over the top of this region. And then we have Jupiter, for instance, going through London, and not really quite through Rome, but let's say through the Greenwich area. And we did have a pope die and a new pope re-elected in the last few months. And then we might look at something like, the Gaza area and Israel and go, okay, well, there's nothing really showing up there. Or over Washington, D.C. And, we can see that the moon is close by, on the midheaven. So, a lot of tension going on there. And the moon sun midpoint was going through there as well with Pluto. So, kind of culminating in those areas. But again, nothing directly over the capitals here. So, therefore, what we want to, let's say, add in that sense is to look at some midpoints. And here we see that, closer to the Gaza area and Israel, we have Saturn and Ceres midpoint. And then, kind of looking back at Saturn and Ceres here, we know that there was a conjunction of Saturn and Ceres not long after that. And they're both in Pisces, and again, culminating over this area here. And then we have Saturn itself. Again, just to, let's say it would show up near the midheaven if we did a chart for Israel, for this ingress. But we have Saturn going through the in Moscow and through the eastern part of Ukraine, which is crossing Mars. So I mean, we see these things and we kind of wonder what we can do about them. But the more that you look at them and the more that I have been looking at them over the years, it's almost like, and, having said we need town criers on every corner. Again, you don't want to alert the world with, dramas and all that kind of stuff. But it's almost like it makes astrologers think, well, what can we do about this? In hindsight, we see a lot. We know that. But symbolically, when we read these things, we know that these are hotspots. And so, anyway, so I'm just wanting to kind of show you more of that. So now this is the geodetic map. Now, ACG maps are, of course, the exact time that we find that it is happening all around the planet and it's stamped onto the world. But the geodetic map is a map that begins at 0 Aries right through Greenwich, okay? And it has moved over the centuries and millennia, even from being, the center being either Egypt or the pyramids, or the 0 point beginning at the pyramids, and then going up through well, Israel, and up through to Moscow, the edge of Ukraine, and again, it still remains a huge hotspot these days. But anyway, these days we do use the 0 Aries point that begins at Greenwich and goes 30 degrees across the planet. So it's like whatever chart you want to slot into this grid, it will show up. So all of Aries, all Aries planets will be above this part of Europe. All Taurus planets, for instance, will be over Israel and Moscow and over to Iran, which then Gemini begins. Anyway, I'm not here to teach you how to read a geodetic map. If for those wanting to know more, I will put some links into a class that you can do, and I will be doing another one later in the year for the CIA. But you get to know, you have to get to know where the spots are, and that every place on the planet has a coordinate. An MC coordinate and an ascendant coordinate, as in degrees. So Melbourne, where I am, has a 24-degree Leo MC and a 18-degree Sagittarius rising. So, when I think of planets in those areas, or in Gemini, the opposite signs, or in Aquarius, the opposite sign of Leo, then they will be kind of on the IC, and as opposed to ascending, the Gemini planets will be descending. So there's alarm bells going, oh, Jupiter's in this area, at the moment, or, something like that. So again, you get to know what you're looking at, right? So again, geodetic map for the Aries ingress, we have the moon right near Los Angeles. So the moon, if we remember, was in Sagittarius. It was out of bounds, and what have we seen happen? Of course, deportations and protests in regard to deportations, and the ICE movement, not movement, organization, government organization, I should say. Again, through the geodetic map, we've got all these Pisces and Aries planets going through Central America. There's been rockets falling in there. Some kind of space mission again returned from there. A lot of things. And, through the USA, we continue to see Chiron and Eris right through Washington, D.C., as they are at 25 degrees of Aries. Washington, D.C.'s ascendant is 23 Aries. So there you go. They're right there. The what do you call it? The country is in chaos. There's a lot of discord going on. And we know the USA is going through a Chiron return. It's about to have a Jupiter return as well. So there's a lot going on. But on the geodetic map, we're seeing these two there. And it's interesting to note that when Donald Trump was elected back in 2016, Eris was still there, a little bit ahead. Chiron wasn't there, but Uranus was there. So Uranus and Eris were conjunct over Washington, D.C. When Donald Trump first got elected. So these are really super interesting. And then, of course, what we've had is the death of a pope, and we've had Neptune cross that Greenwich point. I've said this a few times, but when Jupiter crossed the 0 point of Aries, and on this map, back in 2022, Queen Elizabeth died. And so she was, of course, the royal Jupiter. Now we've got Neptune, a spiritual leader, died, and again, a new one was elected. And as Saturn has now come through this point, just in the last, 2 weeks, what have we seen happen? It's been intense. And I think I predicted on someone's channel that let's just wait and see when Saturn gets to this point. It's a point that affects the whole world. And that's why we call the zero cardinal points world points, right? And then look at this, Uranus right over Tehran. Again, looking, back at our Aries ingress.